How do you polish stainless steel? From prep to polish, we're going to cover that right here. We're going to start out with this 5-inch stainless steel pipe. We're going to speed sand it or rotary sand it. We're going to start out with 320 grit sandpaper. What I did was applied some tallow grease to my sandpaper. This is going to provide a little bit of lubrication between the sandpaper and the part, and it's going to keep the sandpaper from digging in and gouging the metal. You don't want to do that. So we've got our 320 grit done. Now we're going to move on to 600. One thing you want to keep in mind when you have a part like this that's got an actual weld seam in it, you don't want to sand that out. The reason why, it can cause structural integrity parts and failure in the part itself. So you want to try and keep that in. You saw we skipped a grit. We went right from 320 into 600 grit because we're using a rotary sanding pad. So the reason why you do that is because of the higher RPM range. If you don't have a rotary and you're going to use just a DA, you want to incorporate a 400 grit into it after the 320. You want to keep stepping it up one grit at a time. 320, 400, 600. But we rotary sand most of the time, so we start at 320. We bounce right to 600. Now we're going to go to 800 on the DA sander to level all this out. We're going to get rid of all these marks and give ourselves a much easier and better platform before we start cutting. Now we're going to 800 grit on our DA. We're going to do some wet sanding on this. For that, we're going to use Notorious Waterless Wash. It's got just enough detergent in it to help keep nice lubrication in between the surface and the sanding pad. The key to wet sanding with 800 grit and waterless wash is you want to have a fair amount of the product on there. And you're going to start sanding and you're going to keep sanding until it kind of turns into a mud or a paste. And then once that happens, it's drying out. Keep sanding until that paste is gone. So angle is a big thing when you're sanding. Whether you're rotary sanding or whether you're DA sanding, angle sanding on metal is key, okay? For flat surfaces, you want to have just a 5 to 10 degree angle up. Basically, you're only sanding with about this much of the pad. Yes, it leaves a lot of that unused and unexposed, but it's more important to have the right angle on the metal for when you go to start cutting. The smaller pigtails are going to cut out a lot faster and a lot easier. So I was using the Savage discs from Maverick Abrasives. I've used one sheet where normally this one section I would have been 2, possibly 3 sheets in to get this same finish. So 1 sheet versus 2 or 3, that's definitely a good thing. What we're doing right now, we're going to test this section with a stitch sewn pink buff in Q36 on stainless steel. We're going to see what this does. I'm not a believer yet. Let's find out. So I've done this section with a stitch sewn pink in the Q36. I gotta say, it doesn't look bad, okay? So I'm gonna do my process with a red buff and black magic, and we're gonna compare the two. So what I'm gonna do here I'm gonna use the Red Buff and the Black Magic, which is my normal process. I'm gonna load up some of the compound on the part. That does a couple of things. One, it's gonna keep me from having to reload my buff so often. You're also gonna see me do a back cut. I'm gonna start at the top and I'm just gonna pull the buff down the part a little bit. That's gonna open up the pores and help heat up the metal, which is gonna make this a lot easier to polish. All right, so I've done my cut with the Q36 and a pink sewn stitched, and I've done my cut here with a Red Buff and Black Magic. This is a little shinier, okay? But this seemed to work out the prep work a little bit easier. Now I'm gonna color both of them with a UBM white buff and the SS800 blue stainless bar. That's my go-to for stainless coloring. So I'm gonna color them both in the same process, and we're gonna compare them side by side. So I've got my color pass done using the UBM and the SS800 blue stainless coloring bar. Shine for shine, they're very comparable. My opinion, after using the Q36 and the stitch sewn pink buff for my cut, I'm liking this finish a lot better than the Red Buff and the Black Magic. So what I've found out in this little experiment here is that I was able to actually cut out my prep work faster with the Q36 and the pink stitch sewn buff. So that's gonna save me time and money when I go to do a full part. So what we've determined here is that whatever you're comfortable using, whether it be the Q36 or the Black Magic for your stainless cutting process, you can get a great finish out of either one. This seems to be working a little bit faster and honestly probably a little less product. This might take you a little extra time. Go with what you know. There's a vast product line out there available to you. Pick one that's going to work for your needs and it's going to work in your climate and temperature ranges.